Hello, I'm Bob Gorley, the Chief Technology Officer of OODA LLC. I'm here with Bob Flores, a long-term friend and trusted associate. Bob was the former Chief Technology Officer of the CIA, and for the last 5 or 6 years, he's been consulting and helping businesses improve their cybersecurity posture and improve how they work with data and understand reality. He's also a speaker and thinker of note, and I really appreciate you taking time to talk with us today, Bob.
Happy to do it. Happy to do it.
All right. You know, Bob, we have worked many engagements together with a wide range of corporations. And I wanted to take a minute and see what kind of lessons we can extract that might be relevant to enterprise decision makers today, and also relevant to other people who need to understand the value of a potential investment before they make it. For example, a private equity firm who might be thinking about a due diligence assessment.
Well, Bob, so, I think that the biggest lesson I've learned from doing these cyber assessments and due diligence exercises and stuff is that there's an awful lot of companies where the people inside the company don't really have a clue what business that company is in. If you take the CISO of a company, he or she might know cybersecurity quite well, but they don't know the business that they're in. And that's unfortunate because the business that you're in needs to drive your decisions. It's not some, security playbook that should drive your decisions. How do you know what the ultimate risk is for your company if you don't know the business of the company? And so if you are, your company is, manufacturing satellites, or if your company is manufacturing clothing, the risks are different, and the threats are different. So it's really, really important for folks to understand the business that they're in. People used to ask me all the time when I was CTO at CIA, they said, "What makes a good CTO?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure yet, but my firm belief is that you cannot be a technologist within a company unless you know the business of that company. Because otherwise you become a tools junkie and you go out and buy one of everything, and it doesn't matter." So
yeah, Bob, that resonates with me. It really does. And I feel like any successes I had as a CTO at Defense Intel Agency, of course, weren't mine. It was other people doing it. But those that I could cheer on and help the most were the ones that I understood. And my understanding frequently came from my youth as an intelligence analyst and understanding the mission of intelligence. So for us, I know that rings true. And you also reminded me of one other comment I just heard from another mutual friend, Bob Wallace, the author of Robert Wallace of Spy Sites, the famous Spy Sites series, and the Spycraft book and series on Netflix, co-author with Keith Melton. He said something very similar to what you just said. His view was, as I was asking about the management and leadership tips and practices, he said one thing that just always struck him is how sometimes middle management becomes disjointed from senior management, and how important it is that senior executives understand that they have to get the word out and have to educate the workforce on what their goals are, especially middle management, where the job really gets done.
That's absolutely true, and we just don't see enough of that, frankly. And I suspect if you were to look around at however you want to gauge it, the most successful companies in the world, they are actually doing just that. Yeah,
I think you're probably right. Bob, let's talk technology for a minute, because this is totally related to cybersecurity, but it goes beyond. Technology is there to really serve the mission of these organizations. And I have a thesis I want to try out on you and get your response to. And the thesis is that, number one, the future is here. Like William Gibson said in 2003, the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. Somewhere out there, there's pieces of the future that we can know about. And a part of the art form that these enterprises need to understand is what parts of the future do I need to accelerate into my enterprise? So part one of the thesis is the future's here. And so we need to go out and look for it and find the right stuff. Part two of my thesis is that there's going to be a dramatic convergence of all these separate kinds of technologies, they're going to create new opportunities. For example, you don't just study cloud computing. That's critically important to study, but you need to study it in conjunction with artificial intelligence and mobility and the Internet of Things, and of course, cybersecurity, but also quantum computing and virtual reality and artificial reality, and on and on and on. These in space technologies, these things are all converging into important new capabilities. So I guess that's the part of the thesis I want to try out on you. The power of this convergence. What is this going to do for enterprise missions? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really a new concept, frankly. It's been going on, ever since I've been in the business. I came out of grad school in 1977, and I think again it comes down to it's not about technology, right? Technology is an enabler, but it's an enabler for what? Well, it's an enabler for some business, some mission, some goal that some CEO has set. Some strategy, and in the absence of the strategy, in the absence of the goal, you don't know where you need to go from a technology standpoint. So first, you have to understand what are those mission goals, and then you got to sit back and you got to put your imagination hat on, and you got to say, okay, what would the ultimate thing be? Let's forget everything we know today about limitations on technology. If we were, technology God for a day, what would we create that would solve the problems of this particular company's strategy, their mission, their goals? And look at things that way. And I think that this is what, guys like Jeff Bezos do on a daily basis. And there are others just like him. And I like to think that I do a little of that, but who knows? And so you realize pretty quickly that, gosh, if I could take this nascent technology over here and marry it up with this legacy technology over here, oh my gosh, we could increase productivity by 400% or whatever. And so you go do that and you try it out and you see if it works. And most of the time, at least history shows, it does work. And as long as you stick to the reason you're doing it, all right? Because if you came to me and said, hey, here's 18 technologies, Bob, that I'm going to foist on you, and they're going to make your home life much happier than it's ever been before, that means nothing to me because you have no clue what my home life is. And so, if you, on the other hand, if you came to me and said, I've been working together for 20 some odd years, and these are the difficulties I see you having in your life. If you would take these things, whether they're technologies or medical products or whatever, and use those to their fullest extent, you could be a much happier person. Well, now I might listen to you because I realize that you understand me. And so why not listen to you in that case? So again, it goes back to this premise that you have to understand the business.
Right. You remind me of another conversation. Actually, it was something I saw. Palantir hosted what they called a live demo day in late January. So it was broadcast live. It brought together their leadership, their product managers, and some of the people who are fielding Palantir capabilities in the industry and government. And you and I know Palantir from a long time ago. When they first came to market, they were clearly a way to do better analysis. It was very much an analytical tool. They were doing things that nobody else could do, and it was extremely hard to do, but they were an analysis tool. That's not them anymore. It just underscored for me in this Palantir live demo day that they are there to give competitive advantage to any organization. So it's not just about analysis. It's about connecting data in the smart way. It's about helping manage your supply chain. It's about helping inform your employees of what they might need to do next and what they need to be aware of. And so it's connecting things and generating alpha. It's giving competitive advantage. So it is not just an analytic tool anymore. And your comments reminded me of that. It's just clearly technology is not there for technology's sake. And it's not there because the management team said, this is the technology I'm picking, or that some vendor said this is the right approach. It really has to be there to generate some value. And for most of these businesses, generating competitive advantage is key.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And, you know, even in the world that we came out of, the U.S. government, while we don't talk about financial competitiveness, you're competing against the foreign adversary, right? And so you're always wanting to do better than they're doing at whatever.
Yeah.
Because you got to stay one step ahead, you hope. And so, you know, you use Palantir as an example, and clearly there's, you know, Palantir today has a lot of competitors, and there's a lot of really good companies out there doing essentially what Palantir does. But in the beginning, you know, one of the things that drew us at CIA to Palantir was the fact that they were doing all this stuff that we had been envisioning for like the last 5 years. And, you know, we were trying to play that technology guy and say, well, gosh, you know, what do we need from an analytics standpoint that would really change the game? And the stuff that we kind of mapped out, it wasn't available. And, you know, maybe it wasn't available because nobody had thought of it. Maybe it wasn't available because the compute structure back then couldn't handle it, whatever. Then Palantir came along and they said, look at this. And we said, oh my God, that's exactly what we've been thinking about. And so that caused actually In-Q-Tel to do a fairly early on investment in Palantir.
At this live demo day, it just underscored for me, they are just right on the point. They are about generating competitive advantage for their clients, and whether it's government or industry. And I was just really excited to see that, I think. And I was also excited to see that they're not just an analytical tool anymore. It's really about connecting all of the data to drive decisions.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that, you know, there are lots of companies out there that have, you know, morphed over the years, you know, as they see the need. You know, I don't want to go into a whole lot of depth around this, but, you know, Digital Reasoning is one of those companies. And
another great one.
You know, they started off with in a very niche area, frankly, and then were able to take that and expand it into many, many, many different use cases that I'm sure they had no inkling of when they first started the company.
You remind me of another one, Bob. You know, the first person ever to say the word Splunk to me was you. Yeah. And this was back in the old days. Maybe they had 10 employees. And the way you described it to me was their first use case, which is, this is a search engine for IT kind of information. And that's what it was. But look at them now, just an incredible powerhouse of data associated with security. And everybody knows and uses Splunk. So clearly another example of an early pivot.
Yep.
All right, another question I want to pick your brain about, Bob, is in these due diligence assessments we do, increasingly we're being asked about this concept of technology debt. You know, these private equity firms or a strategic acquirer wants to know, what is it I'm buying? And what's that code look like? And are there security problems with what I'm buying? And are they tied to a bunch of legacy systems that I'm going to have to get rid of and recapitalize? So it's like technology debt is a key discussion topic now. And clearly now that every company is a technology company of some sort, every future transaction, it seems like logically, will have to have an assessment of technology debt. Would you agree?
I do agree. And, you know, one of the issues we don't have today, I mean, that we do have today is that every company's technology is different from the next company's technology. Yeah, they might all use Microsoft Windows on the desktop, but that's as far as it goes as far as commonality is concerned. And until we get to the place, and I suspect we will down the road, until we get to the place where everything is able to seamlessly interact with everything else, then you're always going to have these technology debt issues. And it doesn't necessarily mean, a lot of people think that's a bad word. In this particular use, it's not necessarily bad. So if you're saying, oh, I want to buy company B and merge it into company A, it could be that it's company B's technology that's actually the better one for the strategy than company A's ever was. And so now it becomes a matter of, okay, I'm not worried about company B's technology debt. Now I'm worried about company A's, which I already own, because I'm going to have to make some changes there. And so I think it goes, you have to look at the holistically, hate that word, but all right, all-encompassing look at, again, it's a private equity firm coming in and saying, hey, I want to buy, company A, and we're going to merge it into company B. And well, for me, as a due diligence kind of person working on that problem, I want to know, well, what's the end goal? Okay. Yeah. I mean, I can go and do an assessment. You can go and do an assessment of company B's security, company B's technology, and so on. But so what? You really need to know, where do they want this thing to go?
Right. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And then based on that, where do you want it to go? I mean, are you merging it into another company, or are you going to keep it independent and, one day, resell it or create an IPO? That kind of vision is critical too, because that will inform, how you're going to examine the technology debt.
Yep.
Well, Bob, I have one other thesis I want to try on you, and that is, how can you know? I have a method that I have learned over the years. If a company has any hope of mitigating their cyber risk, that method is this: a single conversation with the CEO will let you know if he cares or not. If he doesn't care about cyber risk and mitigating cyber risk, essentially all hope is lost. His worker bees and his staff and his team may care, but if he doesn't care, it's just not going to work out. If he does care, if the CEO gets it, they still may have a lot of hard work to do, but at least there's hope. What do you think of that thesis?
So I think you're spot on. And, I think that one of the things I've seen in assessments that, I've done and that you've done with me, is that, I will always ask the CEO, what do they care about? And not just, from a cyber perspective, from a business perspective. And if things went haywire tomorrow, what would be the worst thing that could happen to this company, kind of a thing? And all the good CEOs will give you an answer, which is great. Then I go and ask the CISO, assuming they have one, the exact same question. And they ought to have the same answer. If they don't have the same answer, then there's an internal communications issue, and it's up to the CEO to fix that. And I'll inform the CEO of that hey, you guys are working at cross purposes here. And so, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but the ultimate goal is to make that company more competitive, right? And so I think you're absolutely right. The CEO has to care. And, even the CEO doesn't have to know anything about cyber, but they have to care.
Yeah. Well, Bob, it reminds me of another thing I learned from you in doing many of these assessments with you. You are always great at asking the questions that, of course, we prepared and we need to, get information on. But you are also good at asking people, who else should I talk to about this?
Yeah.
And then, getting that follow-on conversation and really diving into the topic until we have a good understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, well, that's an important thing to do, because you don't want just, one person's opinion about things. So it's paramount that you figure out this stuff. In fact, you go so far as to, on some occasions, in doing assessments, I've randomly stopped people in the halls of, buildings where we were doing an assessment. And I had no clue who they were, what their role was. But I would stop and I would ask them certain things about cyber awareness, about the strategy for the company. And, in the good companies, they could parrot it right back to you and say, these are the goals of the company for this year, next year. They're not going to know it as well as the CEO knows it. Nobody expects that. But it's important that communication flow downhill so that the employees, all of them, understand the goals of that company. And frankly, the company that I saw do this the best, this many years ago, was Microsoft. I was on a visit to their campus out near Seattle, and I was still in government. We were getting all kinds of executive briefings, and they had laid out their roadmap for several of their products. And during lunchtime, I was just wandering around campus, and I stopped people at random, and I'd say, "Hey, do you understand the roadmap for this product?" And they did, and they could tell it right back to you. Not as good as the engineers could, but they could tell you.
That's great.
And I thought, okay, here is a company that's got its internal communications solved, and I think that's a key thing for any company.
Great. Well, thanks, Bob. I really appreciate the time today. I think this is a good conversation that will be of interest to anyone who wants to think about doing a due diligence assessment or understand where technology is going, or wants to think through how to improve their own company prior to a major transaction.
Well, thanks, Bob. I really appreciate it. And stay safe.
All right.
And get vaccinated.
All right. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks for listening to this OODA Loop production. For the latest analysis on cybersecurity, technology, and global risks, please visit www.oodaloop.com.